The jungle does not surrender its dead easily. In the steaming September heat of 1902, in the tangled, rain-slicked depths of the Philippine island of Mindanao, the American Expeditionary Force was learning this lesson in blood. The conflict, a brutal and protracted campaign following the Spanish-American War, had entered its most savage phase. Here, U.S. troops were not fighting a conventional European-style army. They were facing the Moro warriors of the southern islands, a people forged by 4 centuries of resistance against foreign conquest, first the Spanish, now the Americans. These were not soldiers who broke under fire. They were men who embraced it. A corporal, his uniform dark with sweat and humidity, raises his standard-issue sidearm, a sleek modern .38 caliber double-action revolver, the model 1892. It is a weapon of its time, lighter, faster firing, and more accurate than the heavy single-action .45 peacemakers it replaced. At 30 feet, a Moro warrior erupts from the green wall of foliage. He is a vision of primal fury, clad in a karambit of water buffalo horn and brass plates, a Spanish morion helmet on his head, a long, wickedly curved kris or barong in his hand. His eyes are wide, pupils dilated by the potent cocktail of juramentado rituals and betel nut, a trance-like state that renders the pain of mere bullets a distant murmur. The corporal fires. The sharp, flat crack of the .38 round echoes. He fires again. And again. He empties the cylinder. 6 rounds place center mass with the cool precision of his training. Each impact is a solid, wet thump against the warrior's armored torso. The American waits for the man to fall. He does not. The warrior stumbles, yes. He is wounded, certainly. But he does not stop. He is a force of nature, a human projectile driven by faith and fury. 30 feet becomes 20. 20 becomes 10. The corporal fumbles with the ejector rod, brass casings tinkling to the mud. It is too late. The last thing he sees is the flash of polished steel. When a patrol finds him hours later, his throat is cut, his empty revolver still clutched in a death grip. A medical officer examines the Moro's body. 6 neat .38 caliber holes are clustered in the chest. Not one had reached a vital organ with enough force to achieve what the army desperately needed: stopping power. This was not an isolated incident. Reports, written in the terse, horrified language of after-action reviews, piled onto desks in Washington, D.C. Lieutenant after lieutenant recounted the same nightmare. Men fired repeatedly, striking what would be fatal wounds on an unarmored man. The enemy advanced. By the time the soldier realized his fire was ineffective, it was too late to retreat or reload. The problem was not marksmanship. It was physics. The .38 long Colt cartridge, with its 150-grain bullet moving at a modest 770 feet per second, simply lacked the kinetic energy to penetrate layered cloth, hardened horn, and determined muscle, then disrupt the central nervous system of a charging adrenaline and drug-fueled man. The modern sidearm, a triumph of engineering on paper, was a catastrophic failure in the unforgiving laboratory of close-quarters combat. The message was irrefutable. American soldiers were dying because their tools were inadequate. The military needed a pistol that didn't just wound, but stopped. It needed a weapon that could drop a determined adversary dead in his tracks before he could close the final fatal yards. The requirement was born in the humid, violent despair of the Philippine jungle. The solution, though no one in the Ordnance Department knew it yet, was already taking shape over 7,000 miles away, in the clean, dry air of Ogden, Utah, in the mind of a man named John Moses Browning. Soon, Chapter 1 earned the Ordnance Board and the quest for power. The weight of these battlefield reports fell squarely on the desk of Brigadier General William Crozier, the cerebral and reform-minded chief of ordnance. Crozier was a man who believed in data, in empirical evidence over tradition. The anecdotal horror stories from Mindanao were compelling, but he needed scientific proof to overturn a recent and costly adoption of the .38 revolver. He needed a test that would settle the stopping power debate with cold, hard numbers. Thus was born the now legendary and notoriously controversial Thompson-Lagarde tests of 1904. Conducted by Colonel John T. Thompson, later inventor of the submachine gun that bore his name, and Major Louis Anatole Lagarde, a military surgeon, the trials were a grim exercise in applied ballistics. Rejecting simple ballistic gelatin, a medium still in its infancy, they used live cattle, human cadavers, and ballistic pendulums to measure the relative shock and penetration of various pistol calibers. Critics, then and now, decried the methods as barbaric. But for Crozier and Thompson, the stakes justified the means. They were not testing for cruelty. They were testing for survival. The results published in 1904 were phrased in stark, unambiguous language that cut through military bureaucracy. The board is of the opinion that a bullet, which will have the shock effect and stopping effect at short ranges necessary for a military pistol or revolver, should have a caliber not less than 45. Their conclusion was a direct repudiation of the smaller caliber trend. The old 45 Colt cartridge used in the single-action revolvers of the frontier era, they found, had been on the right track all along. Its heavy, slow-moving bullet delivered a massive transfer of kinetic energy, creating a larger temporary wound cavity and a higher likelihood of hydrostatic shock, physiological trauma that could incapacitate an attacker irrespective of a direct hit to the heart or spine. But here lay Crozier's dilemma. Returning to the old single-action Army revolver was unthinkable. It was a weapon of the past, slow to reload, limited to 6 rounds, and requiring the shooter to manually cock the hammer for each shot. The future was semi-automatic. The world's advanced armies were already flirting with self-loading pistols like the German Luger P-08 and the Mauser C-96. The U.S. needed a weapon that married the proven fight-stopping power of the 45 caliber projectile with the speed, capacity, and modernity of the automatic age. In 1906, the Ordnance Department issued a formal request for proposals. The specifications were daunting: a semi-automatic pistol chambered in no less than 45 caliber. It had to be reliable above all else, functioning in the mud of trenches, the sand of deserts, the dust of roads, and the freezing cold of mountain passes. It had to be accurate to 50 yards, simple enough for a conscripted farm boy to field strip and maintain with minimal tools, and durable enough to withstand years of hard service. It was a tall order. Many in the firearms industry doubted such a pistol could be built around such a powerful, bulky cartridge. But one man, quietly working in the American West, not only believed it could be done, he had already built it. Cleese, and the patient demeanor of a watchmaker, he resembled a small-town banker more than the most prolific firearms inventor in history. Born in 1855 in Ogden, Utah Territory, he was a child of the gun. His father, Jonathan, was a gunsmith and Mormon pioneer who kept a shop where young John learned not just how to file and fit, but how to think in mechanisms. By the age of 13, using scrap parts from his father's shop, he had assembled his first fully functional firearm. It was a single-shot rifle, but its creation signaled a mind that saw solutions in 3 dimensions. Browning's genius was not merely inventive, it was profoundly simplifying. He possessed an uncanny ability to distill a complex mechanical problem into its most essential, elegant movements. While still in his 20s, he sold a revolutionary single-shot rifle design to the Winchester Repeating Arms Company. It became the iconic Model 1885. His subsequent lever-action designs, like the Winchester Model 1886 and Model 1892, became the quintessential rifles of the closing American frontier, beloved for their smooth action and rugged reliability. But Browning's gaze was fixed beyond levers and falling blocks. He was captivated by the energy of the cartridge itself. While others saw spent powder gases and violent recoil as waste to be managed, Browning saw potential energy, waiting to be harnessed. In the 1890s, he began patenting designs for gas-operated shotguns and, most critically, recoil-operated pistols. His fundamental breakthrough was the concept of short recoil. In this system, when a pistol is fired, the barrel and the bolt, or slide, are locked together for a fraction of a second. They travel backwards a short distance as one unit, absorbing the initial massive recoil impulse. Then, a pivoting or tilting link unlocks the barrel from the slide. The barrel stops its rearward travel, while the now unlocked slide continues back, extracting and ejecting the spent casing, cocking the hammer, and compressing a recoil spring. That spring then drives the slide forward with relentless force, stripping a fresh cartridge from the magazine and chambering it, while simultaneously relocking with the barrel. It was a symphony of controlled violence, a perfect cycle where the weapon's own fired energy powered its reloading. To firearms designers of the era, it was a revelation. When Browning first demonstrated a prototype to the Colt Patent Firearms Manufacturing Company in 1895, the executives were reportedly stunned into silence. They quickly signed an exclusive agreement, recognizing they were in the presence of a visionary. By the time the Army's 1906 solicitation landed, Browning and Colt were already years ahead. They had a working .38 caliber automatic pistol. Scaling it up to .45 was the challenge. Browning didn't just modify an existing frame, he designed a new cartridge from the ground up. The .45 automatic Colt pistol, or .45 ACP. It was a masterpiece of ballistic compromise. Its 230-grain, round-nosed bullet traveled at a subsonic 850 feet per second. This subsonic velocity meant less barrel wear, less muzzle flash, and later made it ideal for sound suppression. More importantly, that heavy, slow-moving projectile was a sledgehammer. It traded high velocity for massive sectional density and energy transfer, exactly what the Thompson-Lagarde tests had prescribed. The pistol built around it was a testament to Browning's philosophy of over-engineering for reliability. It was all steel, sturdy, and heavy. Its single-stack magazine held 7 rounds, only one more than the old revolver, but those rounds could be fired as fast as a man could pull the trigger, and the magazine could be swapped in seconds. He incorporated subtle but profound safety features. A grip safety that prevented the pistol from firing unless held correctly, and a manual thumb safety to secure the cocked hammer. The controls were large and designed to be operated under stress. The entire weapon was built with generous tolerances. Parts fit together with a slight purposeful looseness that allowed grit and carbon fouling to pass through without jamming the action. It was not a delicate target pistol. It was a combat tool, built for the cruel realities John Browning had never seen, but intuitively understood. Chapter I-4. The Forging of a Legend, World War I, and Alvin York. The M1911's baptism of fire came in the muddy, industrialized slaughter of the Western Front. Initially, some soldiers, accustomed to the simple point-and-click mechanics of a revolver, were skeptical of the newfangled automatic. Could its delicate-looking mechanism survive the omnipresent muck of the trenches? The pistol quickly silenced doubters. Its sealed design proved more resistant to mud than a revolver's open cylinder. Tank crews operating in cramped metallic confines, where a long rifle was a liability, adopted it as essential personal defense. Aviators carried it as a last-ditch weapon if forced down behind enemy lines. But the legend of the M1911 was cemented not in the anonymous collective experience of the trenches, but in the singular, almost mythological actions of one man, Corporal Alvin York. On October 8, 1918, in the shattered woodland of the Argonne Forest in France, York, a conscientious objector from the Tennessee mountains turned reluctant warrior and superlative marksman, found himself leading a reduced squad of 17 men. Their objective was to silence a nest of German machine guns on Hill 223. As they worked through the dense brush, they inadvertently flanked a German headquarters and stumbled directly into the heart of the enemy position. What happened next was a sequence of events so extraordinary it reads like a Hollywood script, yet it is meticulously documented. German machine gunners, realizing they were attacked from behind, swiveled their guns and opened fire at point-blank range. 6 Americans fell killed, 3 wounded. York, positioned on the skirmish line, was one of the few not immediately pinned down. He later recounted, "Those machine guns were spitting fire and cutting down the undergrowth all around me, something awful." Using the sharpshooting skills honed hunting wild turkey in the mountains, where he learned to shoot the last bird in a line first to avoid scattering the flock, York went to work. From a prone position 300 yards away, he began systematically picking off the German gunners with his M1903 Springfield rifle. His fire was so accurate and deadly that a German lieutenant, believing he was under attack by a much larger force, ordered a bayonet charge to silence this lone, devastating rifleman. 6 German soldiers, bayonets fixed, broke from the trench line and rushed York's position. York had just emptied his 5-round rifle magazine. He had no time to reload. He later said, "I didn't have time to reload my rifle. so I jerked out my .45 automatic and touched them off, too. I touched off the sixth man first, then the fifth, then the fourth, and so on. That's the way we shoot wild turkeys at home. In less than 10 seconds, all 6 charging Germans lay dead or dying. York's M1911 had functioned perfectly. There was no jam, no misfeed under the extreme stress of a life-or-death engagement. The devastating close-quarters performance of the .45 ACP was undeniable. The German lieutenant, witnessing this display of seemingly superhuman prowess, surrendered his entire force to York. By the end of the action, York and his 7 remaining men had captured 132 prisoners and silenced over 30 machine gun positions. For his actions, he received the Medal of Honor. When historians and forensic investigators in 2006 painstakingly mapped the battlefield and recovered 30-06 and .45 ACP cartridge cases, their distribution corroborated York's account with stunning precision. The 23 cases of .45 ACP, clustered in a small area, told the story of a close-range, rapid-fire fight for survival. Alvin York did not just become a national hero, he became the M1911's most powerful testament. The story spread through the American Expeditionary Forces. The new automatic pistol had saved the life of America's greatest hero of the war. It had the power to stop a bayonet charge. Any lingering doubts about its adoption vanished in the glow of York's legend. Chapter 3. The Torture Test, Birth of the Model of 1911. The U.S. Army's pistol trials between 1907 and 1911 were arguably the most grueling competitive tests ever inflicted on small arms. They were a crucible designed not to find the best target shooter, but the last pistol standing. Competing against Browning's Colt were formidable entries, a sleek design from Savage Arms, and even a modified version of the famous German Luger, chambered in .45 ACP. The pistols were subjected to a brutal regimen. They were fired until their barrels glowed cherry red, then dunked in water to cool, creating rapid thermal stress that could warp metal. They were buried in fine sand and silt, then fired without cleaning. They were coated in a slurry of mud and fired. They were left out in the rain for days, then expected to function. They were dropped onto hard ground from shoulder height. Thousands of rounds were fired through each weapon, with inspectors meticulously noting every failure to feed, fire, or eject. The Colt, with its Browning-designed action, began to pull away. Its simple, robust mechanism shrugged off contamination. The Savage design, while innovative, proved more temperamental, its tighter tolerances vulnerable to grit. By the final decisive trial in March of 1911, it was effectively a two-pistol race. On March 3rd, at the Springfield Armory Range, the final endurance test commenced. A single Colt pistol, serial number 5, was to fire 6,000 rounds over 2 days. John Browning himself was present, a quiet, confident figure amidst the military observers. The pistol was fired in strings of 100 shots, allowed a brief cool-down, then fired again. The pace was relentless. The barrel grew so hot that the wood of the forerange started to scorch. An officer suggested halting. Browning's solution was characteristically practical. A bucket of water was placed beside the firing line. Every 100 rounds, the pistol was plunged into it, steam hissing violently. It was then wiped down, re-oiled, and the firing resumed. The observers watched for the slightest hiccup, a stove-piped case, a failure to go into battery, a light primer strike. Through 5,000 rounds, the Colt performed flawlessly. At 6,000 rounds, it fired its final shot without a single mechanical malfunction. The Savage pistol, tested concurrently, had suffered 37 stoppages. The data was incontrovertible. The Colt was not just better, it was in a class of its own. On March 29, 1911, the United States Army issued General Order No. 16, formally adopting the automatic pistol caliber .45, model of 1911. The U.S. Navy and Marine Corps followed shortly after. The pistol cost the government approximately $14.50 per unit. It weighed 2.5 pounds unloaded, was 8.25 inches long, and fired a bullet that could penetrate over 20 inches of ballistic gelatin. No one, not even the optimistic John Browning, could have predicted that this tool, designed to solve a specific problem in a colonial war, would become the longest-serving firearm in American military history. Chapter 5. Refinement and mass production, the A1 in the arsenal of democracy. The Great War revealed the M1911's strengths, but also suggested refinements. Soldiers reported that the original model's long hammer spur could sometimes bite the web of the shooter's hand during recoil, a phenomenon dubbed hammer bite. The grip safety's small tang could be difficult to fully depress in a high-stress, off-angle grip. The flat mainspring housing felt awkward to some. The Ordnance Department, under the leadership of technicians like then-Major, later General Julian S. Hatcher, listened. Between 1921 and 1926, they incorporated these battlefield lessons into a refined design. The changes were subtle but significant: a shorter, rounded, spurless hammer, a longer extended tang on the grip safety, a slightly arched mainspring housing for a more natural point, a narrower, serrated trigger. The cosmetic checkering on the grips was simplified for easier production. In 1926, the improved model was standardized as the model of 1911 A1. It was the perfect evolution of Browning's design, the same magnificent engine, now housed in a slightly more ergonomic and user-friendly chassis. This was the pistol that would face the global cataclysm to come. When the United States entered World War II in December 1941, the demand for the M1911A1 became insatiable. Millions of men needed sidearms. Colt, the primary manufacturer, was already at maximum capacity producing machine guns and other weapons. The government turned to the arsenal of democracy, contracting with companies that had never built a firearm. It was a staggering feat of industrial mobilization. Remington Rand, a leading manufacturer of typewriters and business machines, became the largest producer of the M1911A1, turning out nearly 900,000 pistols in its Syracuse, New York plant. Union Switch and Signal, a maker of railroad equipment, produced over 55,000. The Ithaca Gun Company, known for its shotguns, manufactured roughly 335,000. Even the Singer Sewing Machine Company, exemplar of precision manufacturing, was given a contract. While Singer only produced about 500 pistols, at an astronomical cost of over $500 each as a pilot run, they are now among the rarest and most collectible of all 1911s, legendary for their exquisite fit and finish. To speed production, cosmetic changes were made. The beautiful deep-blued finish of peacetime gave way to a dull, non-reflective, parkerized phosphate coating. Checkered walnut grips were replaced with smooth or ribbed brown plastic. But the heart of the pistol, the forged steel frame and slide, the tilting barrel lockup, the 45 ACP chamber, remained unchanged. It was a testament to the design's manufacturability that typewriter companies could successfully build such an effective weapon. The M1911A1 went everywhere American forces fought. It was on the hips of officers storming Omaha Beach. It was in the shoulder holsters of bomber crews over Ploiești. It was tucked into the packs of Marines fighting in the coral hell of Tarawa and the black sand of Iwo Jima. Tank crews in particular revered it. In the confined space of a Sherman tank, a full-length rifle was useless. The M1911A1 was the crew's primary personal defense weapon if they had to bail out of a burning vehicle. As one tanker grimly put it, you stick it out the hatch and start shooting to make them keep their heads down. The 45 makes them respectful. Its reputation crossed enemy lines. German soldiers who prized captured American gear designated the M1911A1 as Pistole 660AA, the A denoting its American origin. In the desperate final days of the Reich, Volkssturm militiamen were issued any weapon available, and captured 45s saw use against their former owners. By war's end, nearly 1.9 million M1911A1s had been produced for the conflict. It had proven itself in every climate, from the Arctic to the tropics, and had earned the unshakable trust of a generation of American fighting men. Chapter 6: The Long Sunset, Korea, Vietnam, and Reluctant Replacement. The end of World War II did not mean retirement. In 1950, the M1911A1 was again called to service in the frozen mountains of Korea. In the bitter cold that could freeze the lubricants in more complex weapons, the 1911's simple, robust action continued to function. Its potent round was devastating in the close-quarter battles that characterized the Korean conflict, particularly during the brutal Chinese human wave attacks. Its greatest trial in a conventional war, however, came in the jungles and rice paddies of Vietnam. Here, the pistol's role became even more specialized and terrifying. Tunnel rats, the small-statured soldiers who volunteered to crawl into the vast, booby-trapped underground complexes of the Viet Cong, almost universally chose the M1911A1. A rifle was impossible to maneuver in the pitch-black, claustrophobic tunnels. A shotgun had limited capacity and ferocious recoil. The 1911, with its 7-round magazine, often loaded with an 8th round in the chamber, manageable recoil, and immediate stopping power, was ideal. In a space where engagements happened at arm's length, the 45's ability to drop an enemy with one shot was not just preferred. It was a matter of survival. The sound of a 45 firing underground was deafening, but the alternative, leaving a wounded, armed VC behind you in the dark, was unthinkable. Special Forces operators, long-range reconnaissance patrols, LRRPs, and pilots carried customized 1911s, often with improved sights or finishes. Yet, even as it continued to serve with distinction, geopolitical and logistical pressures were mounting against it. NATO was standardizing on the NINX 19mm parabellum cartridge. The argument was one of logistics and capacity. A 9mm pistol could hold nearly twice as many rounds as a 1911, and its ammunition was lighter, allowing a soldier to carry more. The 9mm round also produced less recoil, theoretically allowing for faster follow-up shots. After a long, contentious, and politically charged series of trials in the 1980s, the U.S. military officially adopted the Italian-made Beretta 92F, designated the M9, on January 14, 1985. The official reign of the M1911 as the standard-issue sidearm of the U.S. Armed Forces was over after 74 years of continuous service. A chapter of history had closed. Or so it seemed. Epilogue: The Immortal Machine. Today, the M1911 exists in a state of perpetual relevance. Its original U.S. patent expired generations ago, liberating the design into the public domain. It is no longer a pistol model. It is an entire ecosystem. Nearly every major firearms manufacturer in America, Colt, Springfield Armory, Smith & Wesson, Sig Sauer, Ruger, Kimber, produces multiple variants. They range from faithful historical reproductions to cutting-edge 2011 models with double-stack magazines and polymer frames, chambered in everything from the original 45 ACP to 9mm, 10mm, and 38 Super. It is estimated that well over 10 million M1911 pattern pistols have been produced worldwide. It is the official state firearm of Utah, honoring its native son. It dominates competitive shooting sports like USPSA single-stack division. It is carried by countless law enforcement officers and responsible citizens for personal defense. Why does it endure? The answer lies in the timeless principles John Moses Browning encoded in steel over a century ago. In an age of increasing complexity, the 1911 is a monument to elegant simplicity. Its short recoil operating system is mechanically pure, a direct, efficient transfer of energy with no unnecessary parts. Its generous tolerances make it reliable under conditions that would choke a more tightly fitted weapon. The 45 ACP cartridge, while debated by ballisticians, delivers a psychological and physiological impact that is immediately apparent on the range and has been proven time and again on two-legged predators. The M1911 is more than a collection of parts. It is an artifact of American industrial genius. Born from a specific failure on a distant colonial frontier, it is a veteran of every major conflict, from the punitive expedition to the global war on terror, from the hands of Alvin York to those of Delta Force operators in the Hindu Kush. It is a direct mechanical link to the mind of a man who could see the perfect movement in the chaos of exploding gunpowder. Its story is the story of 20th-century American warfare, a tool designed to solve a problem, tested in the cruelest conditions, refined by the blood and feedback of its users, and ultimately passing into legend not through marketing, but through unwavering performance. It was designed to cost $15 and last a decade. It became immortal. In armories, in holsters, and in history, the pistol that would not be stopped endures. Chapter 7. The Phoenix. Special operations in the 1911 Renaissance. The bureaucracy had moved on, but the operators had not. While the regular Army and Marine Corps transitioned to the 9mm Beretta, America's most elite special operations units quietly rebelled. For them, the debate wasn't about NATO standardization or magazine capacity. It was about terminal performance in the most critical moments of a mission. Units like Delta Force, formed in 1977, had never fully abandoned the 1911. Its founder, Colonel Charles Beckwith, a veteran of the British SAS, was a staunch advocate of the 45's stopping power, particularly for close-quarters battle, CQB, and hostage rescue scenarios. In a room crowded with hostages and terrorists, the 9mm's tendency to overpenetrate was a liability. The heavy, slow 45 ACP was more likely to expend its energy in the target, reducing the risk to innocents behind. Delta armorers became artists, taking serviceable M1911 A1s and transforming them into precision instruments. They fitted match-grade barrels, installed high-visibility combat sights, beveled magazine wells for faster reloads, applied aggressive grip textures, and tuned the triggers to a crisp glass rod break. These were not museum pieces. They were purpose-built fighting tools. The Navy SEALs, conducting maritime operations where corrosion was a constant enemy, also continued to use customized 1911s, often with specialized nickel or other corrosion-resistant finishes. The FBI's Hostage Rescue Team, HRT, adopted a specific variant, the Springfield Armory Professional Model. The 1990s, after their own exhaustive tests, reaffirmed the 45 ACP's superiority in ballistic gelatin tests, simulating real-world shooting scenarios. This grassroots renaissance by the nation's top-tier warriors could not be ignored. In 2012, the United States Marine Corps officially returned to the fold, awarding a contract to Colt for 12,000 units of the M45A1 close-quarter battle pistol, CQBP. This was not a nostalgic reissue. This was a modernized 1911 for the 21st century. It featured a Picatinny rail for mounting lights and lasers, a durable Cerakote finish, night sights, and a more ergonomic grip. It was issued to Marine Corps Forces Special Operations Command, MARSOC, and critical security units. In 2019, photographs emerged of General Scott Miller, the commander of U.S. and NATO forces in Afghanistan, and a veteran Delta Force officer, with a customized 1911 on his hip. The message was clear. After over a century, for those who go into harm's way at the highest level, John Browning's design remained a tool of choice.